So it's good to be here at the design portion and talking about engineering. And hopefully they've all left the room so we can say whatever we need to about them. I'm going to find the clicker. Here we go. So I have a little bit of a different presentation. In talking about design and engineering and how they work together, at times I take it for granted that it's a good relationship, but I know maybe for some of you it's a little bit more contentious, and certainly in the past for me it has been as well. So hopefully I can give you some tips about how to make that better. There are a couple takeaways that I want to emphasize that I think are perhaps a bit about how we think about design and engineering at Square. First is that we always ask why, and we continually ask why until we get to the core of the problem, whether we are designers or engineers or finance folks or security, risk, whatever the group may be. The details, this is not a design presentation, but the details make the design. And we are all designers, whether we're engineers or designers. And that is, that's a really important point that I think we live every day at Square. So the presentation has kind of two parts. The first one is a case study that I can't show you, so I'm going to try to talk in general ways, and then hopefully give you some of my experience in methods by which we can work better together. So I'm going to start with a little video, so hopefully there's audio, and maybe it'll put things into context for the rest of the presentation. Let's see if it works.
Let's take it down.
Roger that.
Yes, Captain. Let's go through that gateway.
There.
Right there. God does not build in straight lines.
This valley, Captain.
So it was a clip that we found after the presentation was done because I wanted to make the talk about how to draw a straight line. And some of the initial versions of the presentation started off with this God concept and ended with sex. And I thought if I have a keynote presentation that does those two things, I'm already winning. I'm ahead. But I'll tell you why it was about this, because I give a talk every week at Square for the new hires, which is about design for non-designers. And the first thing I talk about, and you guys have heard millions of presentations about design, it's like, how do you get from point A to point B? And I thought, I'm not going to do a design presentation, but how do I talk to a room of designers about this concept? And I started to think about this straight line. And I said, well, let me see if I can figure out how to talk about a straight line and what that means. So I made some notes because I had a presenter notes, but so here they are. This is kind of how I draw a straight line. And when we're kids, we learn, and it's one of those things, and eventually we get better and better and better about it. And it's not very good, but it's in some ways what I could distill as the building block. The first thing that we do as designers or artists is like, can we draw a straight line? And what does that mean? So I went back in time a little bit to 5,000 or probably a lot more BC, and you have the cave drawings. And these guys certainly didn't have rulers or anything, but they did okay. They drew the lines, and it made a little bit of sense. And they had no engineers, perhaps, at this point, or maybe the guy that was making the paint would be considered the engineer. But then we move a little bit more forward in time and to the Egyptians. And these guys, certainly the designers of the pyramids, needed to be able to do a straight line. So they call on their engineers, and they invent the plumb line, which was an incredible innovation, but it's basically a string with a weight, and all of a sudden now you have a line. Now the pyramids go well beyond that into areas that, you know, at times we don't even comprehend now. Not only did they get straight lines, but they created alignments that are more complex with that. But it was, for me, the first time that I started to see the designer and the engineer starting to work together to fulfill on something that was greater than both, magical and, you know, considered one of the seven wonders. So I'm clicking on two things, sorry. So then I started to think about how do I define a straight line, and the math and Euclid and geometry and the formula that goes behind it. And I got to the point where I said, this makes no sense, you know, what am I trying to talk about? And why don't I just like grab a ruler and just draw a straight line? At this point, you know, we can do that pretty easily. And it's here that I think I kind of begin the case study as it relates to square how I think about design, and perhaps how you guys think about it, in that we create these experiences that we want to be really great and perfect in the details. And how do we go about doing that? And how do we obsess and make, as we mentioned earlier, design that is transparent? And a ruler is precise. It's good enough. A ruler is not accurate, though. So the obsession and the attention to detail is something that drives me, that drives perhaps most of you guys to do things as perfectly as possible. So we turn to the engineers for help, and and this is what I wanted to show, because this is the first machine by a Frenchman from the 1800s. I believe his name is pronounced Postelier, and he invented this linkage machine, which was the first time that they were able to draw an accurate straight line, a perfect straight line. Granted, the pencil that was drawing it might not have been accurate, but the motion was perfect. And it works something like this. I'm going to stand over here. There it goes. So it translates a circular motion into a straight line. And I thought that was super cool, because as a designer, if I wanted to draw a straight line, I would have never come up with this. So another great example of the engineer and the designer coming together to create this line, which just works. And it's kind of magical in a way. Tons of applications around this beyond just drawing a straight line. You can imagine engines and pistons translating the rotary motion into an up and down motion, and so forth. Okay, so move forward to a little bit more of our current scenario, and we get computers, and we get Illustrator, and we want to draw a straight line. There's a few ways that this is done, and it's done through algorithms, and there's a couple of them. This one is called Bressenham's line algorithm, which takes the pixels and begins to create something that to the eye looks like a straight line. There's many others that do this well, and it makes it possible. So I guess the concept that I'm trying to show is, with the most basic form, how the dependence between the designer and the engineer become one and the same, and make things come together. Now, at Square, we have a project ongoing now, which which I can't show you, but it's basically about drawing a straight line. And so when we started, the team was sitting together and we started drawing this line, amongst other things. And the conversation started about how we did this and questioning how we were going to do it and what the outcome was and how great it was going to be. And maybe some of you guys can relate to that. Maybe some of you guys can't. But I really wanted this to be the most beautiful one-pixel line ever. So the engineers didn't even start here. And hopefully there aren't many in here that can call me out on some of this stuff. But we can draw a straight line through HTML through like an HR tag. And it's pretty good. It starts to break down. There's limitations to it. So we tried CSS, and that's better. It gives us more flexibility, more ways to work around it. The problem is then somebody shows up with an iOS device, a Retina screen, and what used to be my perfect one-pixel line is now 2 pixels. So I go, okay, well that's not good enough. So let's keep working on it. And then they say to me, well, we can do a CSS box shadow. Does anyone know what box shadow is? Okay, a couple guys. I didn't know this. So I go, okay, well that's better, right? And then they say, okay, well, yeah, you're going to get basically it's going to be hard to see on the display, but you get basically a 1-pixel line, and then you get half of a shadow because the CSS is blocking half of the pixel. And I don't know if I'm even explaining it correctly, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, you can tell the difference, and you know that that's not a perfect line. So we keep pushing, and we keep pushing each other. And finally, the engineers come up and they say, we're going to give you an SVG 1-pixel line. And again, I geek out a little bit on when they tell me these things, because I want to learn and I want to know how they're doing these things. And they try to explain it to me. I don't have it completely, but they sent me the code. And what happens is that we are able, and I wanted to show you this. It works better if this was a Retina projector. But the SVG line is a true 1-pixel Retina line, which is as if you were working in inside of the native language of the tool, in the app state, perhaps. But for a web base to pull this off is something that is not happening. It doesn't, certainly we didn't invent this, but it's the drive to get to that detail that is perfect that drives us, that we believe is important in design. And there's no way that we get that done without the engineer helping us make that happen. If you guys have Retina displays, you know you're starting to notice the difference when you go to websites or different applications that aren't optimized. It's depressing. Like, you feel like you need to put glasses on. Everything is so blurry. When our tool, our product comes out in a couple months, hopefully that won't be the case, and the experience is going to be as perfect and as beautiful and magical when we just have to draw one straight line. That's not what the app looks like, or the tool. But that would be awesome. I would still use it. So that was kind of what I wanted to convey there, is that even in the simplest things that we do, in the most basic core pieces of design, we can't get them done without the engineers. And I've always had this relationship with engineers, with writers. I come from the art side, with writers, with research, with content strategies. And I I like to think about these guys as design engineers, and it's not a term I've coined, but I think it's valuable, and I think you're starting to see folks come out, and maybe there's plenty of you in the room, a newer generation that thinks in this way, and these are the folks that I would totally hire. So these are the tips that I would give you in working with an engineer, and they've worked for me, and hopefully they work for you. Kick off the project with everyone in the room. Day one, before day one, the engineer is sitting there. Everyone is coming together to make this a reality. Oh, I'm going to go back. Sorry. It's not animating quite right, but methodologies for me seem to be outdated. Waterfall certainly is a thing of the past. Agile at times seems so burdensome to me as well. I've been lucky to work with folks where you have a shorthand that you can't standardize, but I believe there's a new methodology coming that's going to make this better. Sit next to each other. Get the team. We sit next to designers and engineers from day one. The lead of our design team in the engineering discipline, in the interactive discipline, is an engineer, which is rare. And we also design and code as much as we do in Photoshop. That was my bad. Understand what you're all talking about. So define the goals, the metrics. Performance is as much a metric of success as anything else that the business team would give you, or the research team might define as in terms of usability. Understand those form factors and breakpoints. I'm going to go faster. So you design with those things in mind, not just mobile first, but every breakpoint, and making sure that the content aligns to it. Design every state so the engineer knows what happens when there's an error, when something is broken, when you need any kind of... and importantly, defend your design in that make them understand what you're trying to do at the core, and so then they can help you make it even better. Communication. Define the framework that you're trying to build together. Makes everything much easier. That includes typography, the grid, which is key to everything, styles. Annotate more than they need is incorrect. I messed up on there. Annotate as much as they need, because some engineers don't need a million notes, and that's just a waste of time. Know what jank means? Anyone here knows? Oh, just one? Oh, a couple. So jank is important. You don't want janky interfaces. And engineers, what does it mean? It means when it's, it's just crappy. If something is like refresh rates are messed up, or it just isn't smooth and magical like it should be. And know how to submit your feedback through QA, through Jira, through Bugzilla, whatever it may be, so engineers understand what you're trying to tell them easily. And really quick, in my last minute, define the scope and stick to it. Don't change scope. It's try as much as you can not to do that. It's a pain in the ass for everyone. Don't compromise. Push the designers, the engineers to work with you. And I've never met an engineer that backs down from a challenge. Don't compress their timeline. It's easy because they're at the end. Make sure that you respect that, and then you'll have lots of friends. And most importantly, don't tell them that it's final if it's not. So don't hand a Photoshop file and go, I'm done, everything's cool, and then 5 minutes later change your mind. It's the worst thing you can do. So hopefully those are tips that you can take away. Thank you so much.